Hey guys, my name is Sarah Flake, and I wanted to give some of my thoughts today about how to be an effective communicator. I'm involved with a group of women who like to get together, do personal development, kind of talk about topics that can just keep life exciting and fresh. And someone asked me for my advice on this because it's actually something that I've put a lot of work and study into over the past 5 years, because this wasn't something I was very good at. And I have been making progress. So I wanted to kind of share some of the tips that I've learned through a lot of reading, amazing mentors, on how to communicate effectively with people so that you leave them feeling understood and loved. And in the end, it's like everyone wins. It's this great experience. So just to start out, there's probably like 15 different points. So to start out, before you can even think about effective communication, it is very important to have emotional intelligence. And if you don't know what that is, let me give you a quick primer on it. Emotional intelligence is, first of all, understanding your own emotions, understanding what they mean or don't mean. So being aware and acknowledging of your own emotions. Secondly, managing your own emotions. So, now you have the emotion, what are you going to do with it? Thirdly, being socially aware. So understanding what other people might be feeling, being able to read a room or understand how someone might be feeling. And then fourth is relationship management. So now we understand how I'm feeling, I understand how they're feeling. How can I put this together to create a really powerful relationship dynamic where everyone feels understood? The best book for this is called Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by Bradberry. And anyone interested in effective communication, this is absolutely the first stop on your journey. If you feel like you're struggling with emotion management, or you are super reactionary. I know for me, I was a binge eater for 4 years. I was on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication for 7 years because I was so bad at managing my own emotions. And this was finally something I was able to figure out, and I don't binge eat anymore. I don't need to take medication for that anymore. It was so awesome for me to realize I am not my emotions. And a lot of times the things I think are lying. So figure this first step out, okay? Now the second step when it comes to communication is trust. And creating trust is so vital, because you could be open and willing and ready to communicate with someone, but if they don't trust you, they're not going to hear, and you're not going to have communication. The best book on this is called The Speed of Trust by Stephen M.R. Covey. And he says, the motive that inspires the greatest trust is genuine caring about people, caring about purposes, caring about the quality of what you do, caring about society as a whole. Think about it. Are you going to trust someone who really could care less about you, or about work, or about principles or values, or anyone else? So the first step to establishing this trust is just really caring about someone. If you don't like someone, they're going to know. You're not going to be able to have a conversation with them. They're not going to listen to you. And then another factor of developing trust with someone you're trying to communicate with is don't gossip. Don't gossip. Don't gossip about your spouse, your friends, your family. If someone hears you gossiping, you might think that this is like a little way to create trust because, I'm telling you something that other people shouldn't know. But trust me, they're going to hear that you're a gossip, and they're just going to assume you gossip about them too. It'll shut them down. It'll stop them from communicating. They're not going to feel free telling you confidences. Gossip is a really quick way to dissolve trust. Now, if there is something between you and the person you're trying to communicate with, maybe you had something happen in the past that was harmful to the relationship, acknowledge it. It might be hard to acknowledge it, but even just saying, hey, you know what? That situation that we got into a few years ago, I feel terrible about that. I'm really sorry. You don't have to talk about who is at blame or anything like that. But Covey says a good leader, and I'm changing this to a good communicator, takes more than their share of the shame and gives more than their share of the credit. So anything that might be stopping up this trust funnel, talk about it. Just get it out of the way. I had a relationship with someone. I hadn't talked to them in 2 years because something had happened that had broken trust. And it just bothered me every day that this relationship had been broken. And finally, I just called this person up out of the blue and I said, I'm really sorry about that. Like, I love you, and can we just be friends still? We didn't talk about what had happened. I just called up and I said I was sorry. And then we immediately went back to having a great friendship. But this thing had happened that had broken trust. And all it took was just this acknowledgement. So, if you've got a relationship that's important to you, work through it, acknowledge it. It's going to be a little awkward. You're going to have to maybe just eat crow sometimes, but it's so great when you can get those relationships back. And then the final thing for developing trust is being congruent. So that means if you think a certain way and you have certain values, you are living that way and you are living those values. Covey says, personal incongruence is often a source of suspicion in others. The fastest way to restore trust is to make and keep commitments to ourselves and others. You gotta keep commitments. Don't flake on people unless you absolutely have to. Be where you say you're gonna be. Do what you say you're gonna do. Make the call you said you were gonna make. Be there for them. Do what you say you're going to do. Gandhi says to believe in something and not to live it is dishonest. It really is dishonest. Okay, so now moving into more concrete communication. Be present. Be present. Put away your phone. Put away your computer. Don't be thinking about what you have to do after you have this conversation. Every conversation that you're having is the only thing going on. I work from home, and so it was really hard at first working from home because I was trying to multitask. There's actually no such thing as multitasking. You can do one thing at a time, always. It's just a question of, are you doing it well or poorly? If you're trying to multitask, you're just doing a lot of things poorly. But if you're focusing on one thing at a time, you can get a lot more done. So multitasking is not actually a thing, period. It used to be when my kid would come in to ask me a question, I'd be like trying to write my email and talk to them too. And like, oh, I'm multitasking. I'm important. I can do all these things at the same time. But the email maybe got messed up and maybe I didn't quite hear what she was asking and everyone ended up disappointed and it was stressful for me. A great book about this topic is called The One Thing. Who wrote this one? Gary Keller. The One Thing, the surprisingly simple truth behind extraordinary results. And this is just about whatever you're doing, whatever that one thing is that you are doing, be there, do it, be present. So now when my child comes in and I'm working, I'll say something either like, hey, let me finish this email, take a seat, I'm gonna finish this email and then we'll talk. Or I'll just immediately shut my computer screen, turn and face her, take a breath and be like, hey, what's up? How can I help? You know, it's such a vast difference in communication and it's really helped everyone calm down and made this work from home thing go a lot better. Okay, next topic is asking questions. Asking questions. You have 2 ears and only 1 mouth. If you are talking more than you are listening, you're not going to be effectively communicating. The best way to communicate is to ask questions. Some people think, well, if I want them to know something, I have to tell it to them. No, if you want them to know something, you can ask them questions to demonstrate that you maybe have empathy or you have understanding. Asking questions is so great. It cuts through small talk so quickly. I hate small talk. I hate it. So a lot of these are just ways to kind of get to the core, start understanding people right away. And I think of this analogy of 2 people on a tennis court. My mom raised us to be tennis players, so just bear with me for a second. Imagine there's 2 people on each side of the net, and each one has a big hopper of tennis balls. And they're just taking turns picking a ball up out of their little bin and tossing it over the net. And it might go near the other person, it might not. Maybe the person getting a racket on it, but that person's just standing next to their hopper. And then after the ball goes over, they pick up one of their balls and throw it over. And eventually they've thrown all the balls and there's no more balls left, and that's it. So that's an example of poor communication. Everyone's just kind of saying things that they're just waiting to take turns to say things. And you've probably had conversations like this where there wasn't much questions going on, there wasn't much connection. And after 5 minutes, you're like, oh, well, what do we talk about now? We're out of things to talk about. I don't have any more stories. So now think about actual tennis, where there's 1 ball and there's 2 people on either side of the net. You don't know where the ball's gonna go. You're committed to moving your feet and getting to where the ball is and hitting it back. And so now we've got this ball going back and forth and it can go forever because no matter what, each person is committed to going to where this ball is, maybe taking some uncomfortable shots, maybe they're gonna fall down, you're stretching muscles. It's really fun and it's this back and forth. So when you're having an effective conversation, it's tennis. And even if you miss the ball, you're gonna run, chase it down. And you're gonna start the game in a different place from where you ended it. You're gonna get stronger. You're gonna have fun with this person. So when you ask questions, we're having this great conversational tennis match that anything could happen. You have no expectations. It doesn't matter if it's not where you wanted it, you're gonna run and get it. So I don't know if that analogy makes sense. Hopefully it does. But at our core, at everyone's core, we just crave to be understood. So when you ask someone a question about what they told you, they see that you're trying to understand them. You want to understand more about what they're saying. A great question when someone talks to me is, why do you think that? Or how did that make you feel? You know, I really want to know more, instead of, oh, well, that reminds me of this time this thing happened to me. My mom tells me about a friend that she has who, every time there's a conversation or someone says something, this person's response is, well, that ain't nothing. And then she goes on with her story that might be a little more jazzy about the same topic. And it's just kind of a ridiculous thing where this person is just always known for being the conversational story one-upper. Poor communication, right? So ask tons of questions. It's really fun to put yourself in this space where you're not just always waiting to come back with your story to one up, but you're just trying to show this ability to empathize and to relate. And even if you can't empathize or relate, you know, maybe talk to them about that. Wow, I have a hard time understanding why you feel that way. Can you explain more? So be open to that. Now, mirror neurons are something interesting too. Mirror neurons are something in your brain. I think Dave Blanchard talks about this. So basically, your feelings, your emotions, the things going on in your brain will show up on your face. I'm really bad at hiding how I feel. If I'm crabby and I'm trying to have a conversation with someone, but I'm crabby, like I could be saying really nice things, but if my face looks like this, it's not communicating. My friend Veronica Nelson is so good at this. When you have a conversation with her, her eyes are sparkling and she's leaning in, and sometimes she's even like jumping up and down with excitement with something you tell her. So mirror neurons basically just know if you're not thinking what you're saying, you're going to come across as incongruent. And, you know, if you do have something on your mind and you're trying to have a conversation with someone about something else, be honest about it and say, hey, you know what, I'm kind of distracted right now because I've been dealing with this thing at work. So I'm really struggling right now to be present. You know, it's okay to be honest about that. But just remember, it's not about what you say, it's about how you say it. And people generally aren't going to remember what was actually said in a conversation, but they will 100% remember how you make them feel. I've had so many conversations, I have no idea what was said, but I come away at the end of the night and just think, wow, I really loved talking to that person, just because of how they made me feel. So be aware that this back here shows up here, and get clear about it and create that congruency. Okay, the next point for great communications is don't have an agenda. When you go into a conversation, you're not going in there to fix a problem. You're not going in there to make a certain impression. You're not going in there to, you know, solve any life issues that this person is having. There's a fabulous YouTube video. Google it. It's called It's Not About the Nail. And it's basically the classic thing between women wanting to be understood and men wanting to fix, and this gap in communication. So look it up. It's really funny. But I had an experience last year. My business was kind of struggling a little bit, and I'd kind of pulled back because I was feeling bad about it. And one of my mentors, Amber Smithson, reached out to me over message and just said, hey, Sarah, I just want to hear how you're doing. Can we chat? And in my head, I was thinking, oh, she's going to have this agenda. She's going to want to like get me to do X, Y, and Z. I just know how this whole conversation is going to go. And I was really dreading it. But I mean, I went ahead and I set up the time to talk to her. But for the days before, I was like, oh, I don't want to talk to her because I just knew she was going to have an agenda. But then we got on a video conference and she just was like, hey, tell me how you're doing. You know, what's going on? She just wanted to hear about my life. There was no agenda. And I kept waiting for like the shoe to fall, right? For like, okay, well, let's get down to business now and tell me, you know, X, Y, and Z about your business. But it was truly just, she wanted to understand me. She wanted to know how I was feeling. And I came out of that so excited that I had this person in my life who just wanted to understand me. And guess what? At the end of that conversation, I felt better about my business. I felt better about everything because it was so great to me just knowing that someone, you know, that was a business mentor to me just cared so much more about helping me feel understood, rather than like, oh, I got to help Sarah have this amazing business. So I was so appreciative of that. And it really helped me recognize that there are times when I do that to other people. I might get someone on the phone and think, okay, well, this needs to happen, so let's direct the conversation. But it's just nice for me to have examples in my life of people who don't do that. And you know, it's also like when, say someone's upset about something, something's gone wrong. Maybe you feel like it was some fault of your own. But when people are having an issue, it's not so much about you solving the issue for them. It's about helping them feel understood. In Buddhism, there's a really great story about a guy walking through the woods, and he gets shot with an arrow. And the arrow comes and it hits him, and he falls down, and he's sitting there, and he looks at the arrow, and he's like, oh, who shot this arrow? And what is this even made out of? And, you know, what did it hit? And he's sitting there like trying to answer all these questions, and he isn't moving. He's not taking it out. He's not getting help. And while he's sitting there trying to understand all of this, another arrow comes and hits him again, you know? So I've been reading a lot about Buddhism lately, secularbuddhism.com. Noah Rasheta does a whole series of podcasts about understanding how to minimize suffering. Buddhism is all about minimizing suffering. So when we're dealing with people who are suffering, the question is, why don't they move? Why don't they take the arrow out? And I believe it's because most people are waiting for their feelings to be acknowledged. So if we can ask them the right questions and just say things like, hey, you know what? I'm really sorry that conversation didn't go that way. You must have felt like this, or did this make you feel like that? And acknowledging how they're feeling helps them move on from suffering and helps them heal and minimize their own suffering. So that again falls into the no agenda. It's just about creating this space of acceptance and understanding. Okay, the next topic is being aware of chatter. Chatter is all the little things going on in your head while you're listening to someone else talk. So someone starts telling me a story about their dog getting allergies or something, and I immediately think, oh, my dog had allergies and this happened, and I'm going to make sure to tell her that as soon as she's done. Or about a health problem that they had. Oh, my dad had that same problem, and I think I should tell her this story. And I'm planning out in my head what I want to say before this person has even stopped talking. Chatter will slow down communication so badly. It goes back to that tennis analogy where people are just kind of lobbing random balls over it. There's no connection. It's just this conversational one-upping. And so start being aware of the chatter. Start being aware if you're having little talky voices in your head about what you're thinking or what you want to say while someone else is talking, rather than just looking at them and focusing on them and really trying to understand. My mentor, Kim Fisk, is so good at this. She's such an amazing listener. She's present. She looks at you. She asks the right questions. And she taught me all about recognizing chatter and getting rid of it. And just so you know, when you first start recognizing chatter and trying to get rid of it, the chatter is going to get worse. So for about a month after I started trying to get rid of chatter, I was chattering at myself about the chatter and like completely having trouble with any communications, because I was like, stop thinking about that. Why am I thinking about that? And what is this person even saying? There's so much chatter. But I finally gotten to the point where I start getting that little chatter, and then I'm like, nope, this doesn't matter. What matters right now is what this person is saying. And just calming down, not worrying about what I need to say back, just trying to communicate with this person in a really empathetic way where they feel like I can actually hear them. All right, next point is be more dedicated to being interested than interesting. Or someone who was more religious than I am said, am I seeking to bless or impress? Okay, so having this mindset where you're more interested in them than wanting them to think you're interesting, it's going to help you speak with greater openness and greater integrity. But we have to be listening more than we're talking to make this happen. This is kind of a trite saying, but it's true. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Okay, so if every time they start talking about their own life, you cut them off and start talking about you again, they're going to pick up pretty fast that you don't actually care about what they're saying. Now, another part about this is you can't be more interested in someone than you are in yourself if you're worried about what they think about you. If you're spending the whole conversation trying to convey a certain impression or a certain persona, you're going to have to spend a lot more of the time talking, and it's actually going to be really inauthentic. So I finally got to a point where I realized I'm never going to know what people think about me. I can't read their minds. And even if they told me what they thought about me, it probably isn't completely true. And so I'm just going to stop worrying about what this person thinks about me, and getting to the point where you just have confidence in exactly who you are. Having that confidence in who you are has got to be a foundation for a real conversation, because you're not going to try to spend the whole time giving off some persona. You can just be like, oh, I'm me. I don't have to prove anything. I can just focus on getting to know this person. So, there are no uninteresting things, just uninterested people. Okay, so just be interested. You know, you can have amazing conversations about a 2x4 or about a certain way a pen hits or whatever. It's like, there's a lot you can have an interesting conversation about, unless you're just not interested. So find out what's interesting to them and get interested in it. Ask lots of questions. All right, next point for great communication is your speech patterns. What's his name? Oh, Dave Blanchard. He's the CEO of the Ogmandino Group. He taught me a lot about nonverbals. Well, speech patterns, I guess, is verbal. Slow down. I've been talking a mile a minute. I'm working on this. Slow down, slow down. When I first began coaching, I would hear from people all the time, can you just talk a little slower? Like literally, I was just talking too fast. They couldn't understand me because I was just literally talking too fast. I get excited, I talk fast. Be aware of how fast you are talking and how fast they're talking. Match the speed of your conversation to the speed of their conversation. If you're talking to someone who talks really slowly, slow it down. Maybe you're talking to someone who can fire back at your speed. That's okay. Another great thing that happens when you slow down your speech is you say less and convey more. It forces you to cut out a lot of the extra stuff and just be more impactful with what you are saying because you're using less words. So it makes you be more mindful about communication, talking slowly. And then Dave also teaches about pausing before you answer. So someone will tell me something and Dave said, hey, you know what? Practice when someone tells you something, pause for 2 seconds before answering. And even if you're an amazing communicator and you're hearing and there's no chatter and you have this great question to ask back, if you ask it too quickly, the impression you give is that you weren't listening, you were waiting with this question right away, and you were just waiting for your turn to talk, and you're so glad that they're done because now it's your turn. When you pause for 2 seconds, the person gets the impression that you're thinking about what you just heard, that you didn't have some agenda to cut them off, that they actually could keep talking if they wanted, and maybe in that space, in that pause, they are going to keep talking and say something that gives you more depth and more understanding. This was a hard one for me to start incorporating. So sometimes someone will say something, I'll wait 2 seconds, and then just say something like, whoa, can you tell me more about that? Like, I'm not even gonna say anything. I just wanna give them space to keep going. So pause. That really helps people feel like you are savoring them, you are listening to their words, you really want to understand more. All right, find out what's important to them. You can do this by looking at their Facebook page. You know, if you know you're going to meet someone, or after you've met them, we can tell a lot about people by what they're posting, or maybe by, you know, the kind of clothes they're wearing, if it's a certain band shirt, or what they did the night before. Ask them questions about that. And sometimes if you're really good, you can find out what's important to them by listening to the kinds of questions they're asking you. So if they're asking you a lot about your kids, or they're asking you a lot about what you do for work, or whatever it is, hey, that's a great question. Why do you ask? And that might help you turn it to them where you can create greater understanding. But let's see. So if we find out what's important to them, again, this is going to cut through small talk faster, get them excited, get them buzzing on a topic that they're really excited about. You can see because their face is going to brighten up. Maybe they start talking a little faster. Maybe they get more animated. Those are all really good clues that you're talking about something important to them, and good communication can happen. Okay, the next topic is stripping away identity. I guess I kind of touched on this a little bit about that my desire to be like the world's best health coach, or the world's best mom, or, you know, have this perfect presentation of what I wanted people to have my house look like. But a lot of times our need to be something stops us from authentic communication. Robert Fritz is another person that I've studied with. He's wrote this great book along with Dr. Wayne Scott Anderson called Identity. And it talks about how all the things that we think that we need to be, or we think we are holding us back from actually having true relationships and having growth and understanding how we can make the world a better place. So just an example, you know, I used to think I'm a mom, I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm a yoga person, you know, all these things. But make a list maybe of everything you think you are, and then check it out. How many of those things have to do with what you own, what you do, or the people you're connected to. Now, what if you, okay, so let's say I'm a violin player. What if I didn't have any arms? Would I still be me? Yeah, I would still be me. So I'm not a violin player. It's something I do. I don't know, I do roller derby. I'm a roller derby girl. Well, what if I didn't? What if I didn't do roller derby? I'd still be me. I'm a mom, except if I didn't have kids, I'd still be me. So get to the point where you really understand these are all things you do and they're things in your life, but they don't define you and they're not who you are. And when you can strip away this identity, we get to be more authentic with people. We don't hold ourselves to these false constructs of trying to prove that we are this thing when we're not that thing. We're just exactly who we are in the moment. Brene Brown has an amazing quote about authenticity that I think applies here. A lot of the times our identity gets in the way of our authenticity, and authenticity is what's going to help you have real communication. It's going to what people are going to notice when they're talking to you and realize that you're speaking from a place of truth, not from a place of trying to prop up an identity. But Brene Brown says, I think we should be born with a warning label similar to the ones that come on cigarette packages. Caution, if you trade your authenticity for safety, you may experience the following: rage, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, addiction, blame, resentment, and inexplicable grief. Sacrificing who we are for the sake of what other people think just isn't worth it. Yes, there can be authenticity growing pains for the people around us, but in the end, being true to ourselves is the best gift we can give to people we love. So strip away this identity, strip away the need to be anything, and just be present in the conversation. Say what you think, not what you think you're supposed to say to prop up an identity. It's very, very powerful. Which kind of leads to the next point of great communication, which is being vulnerable. And you don't want to ever have people think, oh, I could never be like you, or we just don't connect. I've heard people say sometimes things like, oh, I just don't even know how I can relate to them. What will we even talk about? And if you feel like you have to, only look for people who are exactly like you or who you can relate to, makes it really hard to have conversations, because again, there's only one you. You're never going to find anyone exactly like you. So get dirty, get real. The best book on this for sure is the book by Brene Brown, The Gifts of Imperfection. And she just talks about how much more powerful we are when we can just not be perfect. Because guess what? No one's perfect. And it's really frustrating to try to have a conversation with someone who won't show any cracks and who is just trying to put off this persona of perfection. So get vulnerable. When I first started coaching, I was trying to be a great health coach, a good example, and oh, I don't do this, and this is how it goes. And I would hear all the time from clients, oh, I could never be like you. And it was terrible, because I wasn't helping them. And guess what? I'm a person too. And so after about 1.5 years, after hearing I could never be like you so many times, I finally was like, you know what? I got to get real. So if I had a bad week on my client calls, I'd be like, oh man, I really blew it this week. Or, oh, that Super Bowl party did me in. And suddenly the things I was hearing was, oh, I'm so glad you said that. The fact that you're struggling with this really helps me. Because if you struggle with it, then I feel better about me struggling with it. And I know that we can still do this. And it totally shifted my interaction with people when I just decided to be vulnerable and to be open. And if I was having a shitty day, we were going to talk about it. And then their shitty day wasn't so terrible either, because it's just something that happened. So being vulnerable is so awesome to creating real communications and real relationships. All right. Challenge your assumptions. Challenge your assumptions. Be open to being wrong about everything. When you're having a conversation and someone says something that you don't understand or that strikes you in a hard way from what you believe, you can immediately put up a wall, or you can say, wow, that's really fascinating. Why do you think that? So you don't have to immediately change your assumption, but you want to know why they think that, because they think something different from what you think. And it's fascinating because, wow, that's a crazy way to think. I want to understand why you think that. And you start having these conversations and trying to understand each other more. But the book, The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, is based off this idea of living above the line, which basically means living in a place where you're open, you're curious, you're dedicated to growth, you're willing to challenge your assumptions. And I love to just wake up every day with a mindset of everything that I know right now, I am open to letting go of. I'm just open to it. I know it right now, but I could be totally wrong. And when you're in a spot where you're ready to just challenge everything and it's not going to hurt your ego, you're able to connect with more people. You're able to ask better questions. Let's see, where's this good book? Oh, so John Gardner, he was the author of a book called Excellence and Self-Renewal. He said, one of the reasons people stop learning is to become less and less willing to risk failure. And in terms of communication, to risk disappointment, to risk embarrassment, to risk being wrong. Are you okay with being wrong? Then have a conversation, ask questions, put yourself at risk of being wrong, get your ego out of the way. And it's so fun when you are wrong about stuff. I love being wrong about stuff. Those are the times when I grow the most. So every day it's like, okay, what am I wrong about today? That's when you're going to grow. Stephen Covey from that book, The Speed of Trust, said, many people aren't into the idea of continuous improvement. So they're working in a company, maybe they've been there for 15 years, but instead of having 15 years of experience, they really only have 1 year repeated over 15 times. So be okay growing. You do not want to be the person today that you are 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 40 years from now. What's the point? You know, just be open and willing. So, make sure to ask the questions to challenge your assumptions when something comes up that you don't understand or you don't agree with. Lean into that. Okay, 2 more points for this. The first is how to create an environment at home where you can pass good communication skills down to your kids. I've been married for 16 years. I have 2 daughters. They're 10 and 12. And so I really want to create an environment at home where we're communicating well, and I want to teach my children how to communicate well. So here's a few ways that we do that. First is every time we sit down for dinner, and we try to have family dinner every day if we can, we pause before the meal and we acknowledge each other, and everyone just takes their turn saying something they're grateful for that day. It's really simple, but it's this pausing, it's acknowledging, it's listening, it's asking, and depending on what they say, we might have some follow-up questions for them to elaborate, or maybe depending on what they say, that's a conversation that carries into dinner. But it's about acknowledging and listening and giving people the right to just sit and be heard, and then teaching them how to stop and listen to other people. And then before bed every night, I learned this from my sister Katie, we all get together before we send them up to bed, and each one of us goes around and we say the best part of our day, the worst part of our day, and the most interesting part of our day. And this is the time, again, where the person gets to communicate. And as the listeners, we sit there and we might have questions about that, and they get to communicate these 3 things. And then we move to the next person, and we give that person to have a chance to communicate to us and us to ask questions. And it makes me really proud when I hear other adults give me feedback like, wow, I was talking to your daughter the other day. She was asking me the best questions. Or I was talking to your kid the other day and I couldn't believe how mature she was speaking to me. And I really feel like giving these daily opportunities for my kids to learn how to be empathetic, how to be good listeners, has really helped them going outside of the home and speaking with other people. So I would encourage you to teach your children and give them these opportunities to listen and to communicate. All right, and the final thing for effective communication is find yourself some great communication role models. I love to watch people talking. I always have. I remember ever since a teenager, I would just sit back and watch how people interact together. You know, some people are super flirty, other people are super guarded, other people ask tons of questions. So watch and see what looks like it's effective. I definitely have role models that I love. When I go to a conference or something, I know that there are people that I would like to be more like, and I'll sit back and I'll just watch them, and I'll watch how they leave people feeling and just the facial expressions during the conversation. Look and see what's working, what's not working. If you don't have a great conversation role model, I would really encourage you, hire a therapist. I started working with a therapist last year because there were things that I wanted to talk to people about, but I wasn't quite sure how to do it. And I hired a therapist, And just seeing how she listened, seeing how she responded. I mean, this is a trained professional, and it was so helpful for me to be in an environment with a great listener, a great communicator, and then taking what I learned from her, bringing it home, and changing the way I was listening and communicating was really effective as well. So if you listened all the way to the end, fabulous. I hope this was helpful. I would really encourage you, if you would like to be a better communicator, know that it takes time. It takes study. There's a lot of good books about it. You can do it. I still certainly have a long ways to go. I still have conversations that don't go well, and I know I'm not engaged in that. I feel like overall, it's been something I've seen a lot of improvement with since I read my first book, that Emotional Intelligence 2.0. So I will list the resources in the comments or wherever. And if you've got more questions about it, or you have more resources that have been helpful for you in learning to communicate, please put them out there. I'd love to hear what those are. And hope you have a great day.